Hey everyone, Miko here with Behavior Analyst Supervisor. Thank you for joining us for our free Wednesday Zoom calls. Here you're watching on YouTube, but you could also join us on Wednesday. If you're interested in the link to these calls to join live, feel free to send us an email at info@behavioranalystsupervisor.com. You can also just check out our Instagram. We post questions every single day on Instagram. We also post the link to our free Zoom calls. Every Wednesday, we go through a different task list item area, such as A1. We'll talk a little bit about that task list item, and then we'll go through 3 mock exam questions relating to that task list area. We hope that this provides an opportunity for you to learn a little bit more about the task list and also dive deep into question dissection. We here at Behavior Analyst Supervisor really focus on providing explanations on why an answer is correct and why it's also incorrect. So we appreciate that you joined us. If you have any questions throughout the duration of this video, feel free to shoot us an email, hit that like and subscribe button for more information. Also, you can always leave a comment and we'll be sure to reach back out to you. Thanks again, and I'm Miko with Behavior Analyst Supervisor. You'll also be hearing from Amy and Kevin. Talk to you soon.
Welcome everybody. Happy
Anybody
Wednesday.
there? Yes,
They're
happy
doing
hump
it
day.
still, I think.
Okay, great. We got a small group. That's all right. All right, Kevin right here, if you don't know me, and next to me is Amy over
Hi,
there, who
everyone.
doesn't like to be on the
I'm
screen.
on the screen.
Okay, you're on screen there. That's good. And Miko's over there in Florida, trying to stay cool. All right. Yeah. So today's topic is F-9, interpreting functional assessment data. Maybe this is why no one showed up, because it's intimidating. I don't know. But the few of you who are here, I hope we can get some fun discussion about this. I just wrote a couple of things about, just kind of like to do some bullet points before we get into some questions. If you're looking at an FA, and generally they are those alternating treatment looking graphs, so that's what I'm going to bring. But sometimes you could do maybe a bar graph as a summary to say, well, the attention condition was, this frequency. So we're going to put the attention here and the alone condition there. And you can just read that graph pretty easily. But one has to differentiate from the other or the others. So if it does differentiate, if you've got one that looks different or higher or lower, I suppose, than the others, then I want you to kind of ask, well, do your procedures actually make sense? So just making sure that what you did wasn't the reason that particular condition had a higher frequency or rate of behavior. And if it's not differentiated, if it all jumbles together, and you guys know what charts I'm talking about right there, right? This is all messed up and you don't know what is what. Then let's look at what level that's happening. If it's pretty low level, then you could probably say, well, even if it's sensory behavior, automatically reinforced, it's not that important, or it's not that big a deal. It's only happening occasionally. But if it's happening all the time in all the conditions, then we're definitely more likely to say it is a sensory or automatically reinforced behavior. And seems like, depending on what that level means, the behavior might be more important to deal with, to change. All right, and then finally, what can you reasonably conclude? And what I'm going to try not to get into too much today, but I want to so bad, is what do you do about it? So that would be the next thing. But first, we're just going to try to interpret graphs. So I have a few questions with graphs. Before I start, especially since we're such a small group, anybody have any questions about this topic or really anything else? But
Can I add something, Kevin?
yes, please.
Cool. The only thing that I like to add is I think that, especially me, when I studied, I looked at these graphs that we're going to look at today. And like Kevin was saying, there's other kinds other than the multi-element graph. And I definitely didn't study any other graph. And so they caught me off guard when I saw a bar graph or something else. But one that really caught me off guard and still does a little bit is when you have a latency-based FA.
Yeah.
Because the data's opposite, right? We want to look for what's lowest instead of what's highest, because the shortest latency will determine the function. So that one to me is like a little bit crazy. And I think one of those reasons we teach folks to look at the axes of the graphs first, so that way we can try to determine what we're looking for in the data.
Yeah, read that one that says latency, right? If you miss that, you're going to totally get it wrong. Good point.
Oh,
Good point.
100%.
Okay. Anybody else? You can chat Miko or Amy.
Yeah, got it up.
No questions? Okay.
Oh, now we get to the good stuff.
There we go. Let's do it. So I found this on Milne Publishing, just so you know where you could find it if you wanted it. But, you know, there's a zillion of these kind of graphs out there. But take a look at this. Amy would like you to go thoroughly and check it out.
Check
Kevin,
all your labels, know
exactly.
if it was effective, identify what kind of graph it is.
Okay. And Kevin would just like you to get the gist. That's all you need.
It's just Kevin and Amy in a nutshell.
It is kind of, isn't it? It depends. But anyway, when you look at the graph and do whatever you're going to do to understand it, let's read the question. Which is the best description of function for this problem behavior? Is it attention? Is it undifferentiated or undetermined? Is it sensory? Or is it attention and sensory?
So you can chat Miko, you can chat me. We're just curious to see what you're thinking.
I am curious to know that. It kind of depends, you know? If you're
Miko,
just
is anybody giving you anything?
Yeah, I have a B in the chat, a B so far.
1B. Okay.
Well, it's intimidating.
Yeah. That's a good point. This can be intimidating when you look at it. And I want you to remember, all of you, I hope, that this is somewhat subjective. All we're doing, which this isn't a statistical analysis, which you should also recognize is subjective, or, you know, it's an attempt to be objective. But here, what we're doing is just visually analyzing. So one person, you know, if it's not real clear, might look at something and say, yeah, I think this is important. And someone else might say the opposite. And I think this is one of those that I'm going to say that I like D the best. Just give you the answer right there. I like attention and sensory. These are both pretty high. This sensory or alone condition is pretty high, whatever this is, 8 to 13. And it kind of went up the whole time. And attention sort of went up too. But these both are together. So they aren't differentiated. If I'm going to choose one, the sensory would probably be the one that I chose, because there's only really one data point where they overlap, right? This is where the attention overlaps with the sensory. But it seems like both of these are important, or at least more important than these other two. So that's why I say it depends on who you are or what you want to do with it. I would say attention and sensory are the most important. You could say attention, you could say sensory. I think probably if you're going to choose one, it would be sensory. Make sense? That those are the most differentiated or the highest. The frequency of the behavior happened most under those conditions. You might want to look at what the conditions were. And maybe you just continue this FA without even these in there. You just switch back and forth between sensory and attention. Again, I said I didn't want to get into like what you should do about it or what we should do next, but reading this, that's where I go. Any comments, questions about? Apparently there was just one undifferentiated or undetermined. And that's okay. You know, if they're all jumbled together, you really can't determine. But I think we could say pretty clearly that the play condition worked as a control. It was lower.
We do have a question
than the others.
Somebody had their hand up, so you know we're a small group. Just unmute yourself and go for it.
Yeah.
This is Georgian. I was thinking more of the center, as you say, because at the end, that's the one that was the highest versus the attention. Because when I first looked at it, my thing was, oh, it's sensory right off the bat without even looking at the others.
Gotcha. That at the end, this one here.
Yeah.
That's what yeah. Okay. And it actually like ends right here. So both of these are the same, right? Like the attention and the sensory look like they had the same frequency. That's an awesome, I'm really glad you mentioned that because I forgot about that. Many of you might be looking this at some trend. There isn't a trend. This is alternating treatments. So, I guess there is somewhat of a trend that, from the different days and different sessions, it does seem like this went up, at least sensory did from the very beginning. But this isn't about trend. It's about, it could have been the opposite. It could look like it really high to begin with, and then it all went down here. But it really matters, is the frequency under one condition greater than the other conditions? So that, I'm glad you mentioned that. It's not the end point that we're looking at, it's the whole thing together. And it's really like, I would say my bet is on sensory and attention. I like both of those being somewhat responsible. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. So it's not just the end point. This isn't like a rate of behavior that you're looking at. This is instead, because it's alternating treatments, we just want to know whether the frequency was overall higher or lower than any of the others. All right, Miko, you're going to talk about this one. So
let's do it.
Mute myself.
Cool. Which is the best interpretation of Aksel's, kind of like Aksel Rose, Aksel's FA? A, Aksel likes to be alone. B, Aksel doesn't like to be alone. C, Aksel suppresses his behavior until he's around others. Or D, Aksel suppresses his behavior until he's alone. Y'all can throw your answers in the chat. If you couldn't guess, I would imagine Kevin and Amy like A names, since we have Anatoli, Elena, Aksel, and Asta here.
Yeah.
That is 100% Kevin's doing.
In that moment, I looked up Russian names, I think.
I use a random name generator when I'm writing questions.
Good idea.
Cool. Y'all can throw them in the chat. You can individually chat them, or you can chat them to the group. Your choice. Anything over there, Amy?
Yeah,
Nope,
nothing here.
It might just be all you.
Well, let's do it. I was gonna start saying Bueller, but then that might.
Wait, you got a D. You have a D.
Oh, somebody said D. Okay.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's go ahead and go through them. So the first thing, and I think one of the most important things, is to figure out what graph we're looking at, obviously. So let's go ahead and look at kind of our graph things. Aksel is the graph we need to be looking at. And then we also need to know what those little circles are in Aksel's, which correlate to an alone condition, which would then hypothesize that it's potentially a sensory function, right? Alone. If it's high during the alone, it's usually sensory or automatically maintained. So when we look at A, Aksel likes to be alone. That seems a little bit mentalistic to me. I don't know what likes is. It's not well defined. It might be a term we use regularly, but when we're defining a behavior, we should stay away from it. So I would stay away from A, and I would stay away from B for the same reason. We don't know that he doesn't like to be alone. Again, a little bit mentalistic. So when we look at C, Aksel suppresses his behavior until he's around others. It actually seems the opposite, right? The behavior is happening when he's alone and not when he's with others, which would be maybe the attention condition. So we can get rid of C, and then we're left with D. Aksel suppresses his behavior until he's alone, which seems like the answer here. As we can see from the graph, all of his behaviors are low during every condition except for the alone condition, and then his behaviors are higher there. So it seems like he's engaging in the behavior when he is all by himself.
Mm-hmm.
Comments, questions, concerns? Looks
well,
good.
let me comment, because I have to, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Well, like you said, with the likes to be alone, if somebody gets reinforcement from an activity, then I might be okay with saying they like to be alone, or they get reinforcement from it. But here, I'm not sure if he is engaging in SIB when he's alone, basically protesting being alone. I don't know. So I don't know if he hates it and that's why he does a lot of SIB when he's alone, or he likes to be alone, so he engages in SIB. I don't know that. So I think D is just more accurate. Does that make sense?
For sure.
Okay. Thanks for reinforcing that. Yeah. Okay. I hope you guys have some thoughts about this, even if you're not sharing. It's all right. Shall we move on?
I think we can.
Okay. Here we go. And same charts, all that stuff to look at. Which is the most likely interpretation of Anatoli's behavior? So here we're in this one. Okay, so you have to read the key again, but here we go. Is it that Anatoli hates sentence diagramming? That B, Anatoli likes sentence diagramming? That C, Anatoli's behavior function cannot be determined? Or is it D, Anatoli avoids attention by engaging in SIB?
I'll have an A in the chat.
Okay.
And I have a C in the chat. We're dueling.
All right. At least we have two different answers, eh? All right. A.
We've been in Canada too long.
Yeah, it's been 2 weeks we've been in Canada, eh? And I'm starting to say a boot. No, I'm not. They don't actually say it in all of Canada, just parts of it. Anyway, let's go through the answers here. What is the most likely interpretation, or what's the best one? Well, what's going on in the graph? Amy would like to know, so let me just explain it to you. So here, the only one that's differentiated is academic. What might be happening in the academic or demand condition? I want you to think it through and say something to yourself about what is happening. So I would say something like, when staff present an academic task, this person, Anatoli, engages in SIB, and then the task is removed. So he's doing the SIB, it looks like, to get out of academic tasks. That's what's happening. Now we can understand, which one of these is the best. He hates sentence diagramming. So if they're putting sentence diagramming out there, then he hates it and he wants to avoid it. That one I can see. I can make sense out of that. Anatoli likes sentence diagramming. Well, I don't know, but if he liked the academic task he was given, then he wouldn't be engaging in SIB for its removal. So I don't think B makes any sense with that. C, Anatoli's behavior function cannot be determined. Well, I think it's a pretty differentiated chart here. It's zeros for everything else, but he engages in SIB quite a bit, or at least some of the time, when he can get out of an academic task, like sentence diagramming. Amy loves sentence diagramming.
I do. I know. I was kind of getting excited talking about this.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I should diagram some.
Here's the
sentences.
direct object. Okay. But finally, I think A is the best answer so far. So let's get to D. Anatoli avoids attention by engaging in SIB. That one's tough. Okay. And this is why it's tough, because I can imagine it. I want you to do this as much as possible. You know, we do this all the time. What was that? What would it look like? Or imagine doing it, or imagine the situation. If you can do that, you can see more clearly what the answer might be. The way that D could work is if they are providing too much attention in this academic task. So when he engages in SIB, they're removing the academic task, but maybe they're doing it wrong and giving him too much attention at that moment when he is engaging in SIB. But that's kind of an assumption on my part, that maybe he's trying to just escape any attention that they're giving him. So that doesn't, I'd have to know that. I'd have to know that they're giving him too much attention when he engages in SIB, and I don't know that. So it makes the most sense that he's just trying to avoid this academic task. So A is the best answer, the one I can be most sure about. Okay, I'm going to read the chat and see what you guys are saying. So somebody said they don't like A because it says hate. I agree. I don't like that either. But it's probably the best answer. He's avoiding, we could say more accurately, but I'm still going to go with that because it seems like he's avoiding it. So I'm trying to take, I'm using colloquial ways of talking about it, but I think it still fits, conceptually, systematically. Okay. Any question, comments, arguments? Yep.
Someone,
hate is escape.
Yep. Someone said hate is the escape. I forgot you're everyone, so you can see the answer as well. My bad.
Yeah, everyone. Everybody's happy. Okay. The other thing, since we have some time, is to talk about these undifferentiated ones, like Elena over here. This definitely is undifferentiated. It's too jumbled together to know what's happening. But remember those bullet points at the very beginning that I went over? If it seems like this behavior is happening this much of the time, from 40 to 80% of the time, given whatever condition SIB is occurring with Elena, that's a lot. And so this really looks like sensory. It looks like there's an automatic reinforcement for this behavior. Again, using more colloquial language, we'd say, well, she seems to like engaging in SIB, for her own reasons. She gets something out of it that we can't see. We don't know what that is. So that makes more sense to me than if the behavior is way down here. Let's just take out the squares that are here. But for Asta, it's like, I'm not sure what's controlling this behavior. This seems more undifferentiated, and I'm not sure I want to intervene like I would with Elena, assuming a sensory function. Do you have thoughts on that too, Miko?
No, I agree. Whenever I've done an FA, if it's undifferentiated, we usually target it as sensory. And then after we start the sensory targeting, if we find that there's a prevalent secondary condition, then we might throw in a procedure for attention if we think that's the second most common. It's so funny because when you study for the test in real life, it's totally different, right? Because the test, it's like undifferentiated, go ahead, do sensory. In real life, it's let's look at the antecedent because the function changes almost every time a learner engages in a behavior. So it's just the connection is kind of funny to me.
Yeah, no, I really like that point because then, the motivating operation that's in effect, or like you said, the antecedent, changing that might really make a difference. And if you repeat the FA, you might get something totally different. So the continued assessment makes sense.